Name is Darija, so it's a little bit more simple. The J is confusing everybody. I've been contributing part-time for a year and a half, connecting more the system to itself, and I'm trying to organize these kinds of spaces. Partner Pod is a format GRLI organizes together with partners and associates, putting in focus or into the center of a 90-minute session a question that arises from within partners and associates on a particular topic. The objectives are to gain insights into some successful examples or models, also to exchange on potential for questions or challenges that each of the partners and associates are bringing, so we can actually have a kind of a knowledge sharing platform and invite other partners and associates into the conversation and potentially have a learning experience. It's also a way to explore different strategies for scaling up and maximizing the impact that you're already having, and also to network a little bit and potentially meet some new people from within the GRLI ecosystem that you haven't had a chance to interact with in the past. Very briefly, how the topic came to mind. As I mentioned, I had a one-on-one conversation with Woxsen with Bhavana a couple of months ago, and we were talking about the Be the Tipping Point initiative, and she brought a question to how the evolution of the content revision for a more regenerative world and for a curriculum that is more for people in the planet can also be impacted by societal impact projects, specifically focused on student-led projects, and how those projects can be further developed from Woxen's side. And I said I'm not an expert, but I would love to bring in some experts from other institutions and actually organize and facilitate a conversation. So that's how we also got to the topic of societal impact through the student-led projects. So what I'm curious about is potentially for both Dr. Anindo and Professor Raquel to share a bit about their own experiences with this topic particularly, and to share maybe one or two questions or challenges that you have been facing while facilitating those projects.
Yeah, my name is Raquel. I'm a teacher, above all here at the Católica Porto Business School. I have been for a long time, mostly into strategy courses related with project courses in which I work directly with teams of students, also related with executive education in the non-profit field, and also do a lot of research and consultancy, especially with foundations, non-profit organizations, and so on. And yes, in my role as a teacher, a tutor in final projects, in the final project course, I have been working with students in a new modality that challenges them to work with non-profit organizations, helping them solve challenges. And that might be one of the things we can discuss about in the pod, but we will see. We will go into further details later.
So my name is Dr. Anindo Bhattacharjee, and it's pleasure to meet all of you in person. I am the Assistant Dean for Sustainable Business Research at the university. And when I say university, it doesn't mean that I'm only operating at a School of Business level. The reason I've been conferred this role, obviously I come from an organizational behavior and human resource management background, but I have been given this role so that we foster a culture of interdisciplinarity in the university. Because so far in the last 2 to 3 years, Woxsen has done a lot of things which perhaps quite a few of you may also be aware about in the social impact area. But how do we structure all those learnings that we have because social impact is just one thing, but what is the knowledge that we create out of it, and eventually how all of that can convert into different kinds of structures and frameworks on which we can discuss, we can have dialogues, and we can understand how can we improve the way management education is being delivered and student learning experiences are being improved. So, my role is basically to look after all these three aspects. So going beyond sustainability and also thinking about bringing the business stakeholders and also creating the right kind of research ecosystems so that we promote more action learning and action research and create knowledge which could be helpful and bridge the gap that exists between global north and global south. Yeah.
So I have 2 or 3 projects, things I could focus on. One of them is the one I mentioned before. So we have a course in our undergraduate programs in management and in economics, which is simply called Final Project. And typically students developed Final Project can be made in 3 modes, but focusing on the final project that was dedicated to the production of an analysis of an organization. Typically, students selected a company and they would do the typical strategic analysis, applying the models learned, and then they would prepare a presentation in the end. And for the analysis, they would typically do 1 or 2 interviews with company members, and then they would go into document analysis. That was a typical course. But last year, and given my long-lasting focus on nonprofit organizations, I decided to propose to the school to create a modality inside this course, which we named until now Report with an Organization. And that means that we challenge social organizations, social nonprofit organizations. We do that approach as teachers first, and then we try to understand what are the main challenges that they have. And when they decide that they want to go for this, and when the course started, we launched the possibility to the cohort that can be 200 students, and we have 2 or 3 places for groups to apply. And what they do is very interesting, because the first thing they do is a field visit to understand what the social nonprofit does, what are their challenges, and so on. And so they start the other way around. So they try to understand and capture the problem, the challenges, and they try to, while doing the typical analysis, external, internal, and so on, they start working on solutions. And then they start soliciting new field visits. For instance, we have one group now working with the food bank in Porto, and they have many challenges in terms of provision of foods. And so they have gone to local producers of fresh produce. They've gone to the local supply markets and several times to understand how can we improve this capacity of giving of fresh products and also dry products. So in the end, they will have the organizations present when they will do the presentation, and they will deliver packs packs, physical packs, like this is the solution for problem A, this is the solution for problem B, our proposal for problem C. And they prepare the report in a way that they not only satisfy our what we are looking for as academics, but they also satisfy the nonprofit organization. And it's a challenge because some of them, they tell us, we've never been asked to do things for the real world. And this is not easy, this is hard. And I say, go to the field. And it's interesting to see how they learn that theory can really be applied to practice, and that theory is not different from practice. And so it's been an interesting path until now. So we had 2 teams last year. Now we're having 3 teams, so 2 devoted to local food bank challenges, the other one working with an organization that deals with people with disabilities, and they're building like a new social consultancy department inside this organization, which means looking into many things, including benchmarking and so on. So it's really trying to mobilize their knowledge. So they are final year students, so they're supposed to mobilize all their knowledge into a practical problem in the nonprofit arena. So that is one. And very briefly, I also have 2 other things that I could explore if it makes sense to you. One is one course that we also have in the undergraduate programs that was created maybe 8 years ago, I think, which is called Christianity, Cultures and Organizations. And in fact, we were challenged 8 years ago by the rector in Lisbon to create a new course on Christianity. And we used that challenge and flipped it around and said, in such a diverse world in which our students, economics and management students, are going to work, we would like to tell them and explore with them the 5 major religions of the world. So Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism. And so we start by exploring those 5 religions. What are they? What are their rights? In which do they believe? What are the challenges that organizations may face when they have diverse workforces in terms of religion and so on? And then we discuss case studies, real or made up case studies that students have to prepare in groups. Some of them were widely disseminated in media, so it's very easy, but it's interesting to see how they get involved with trying to give solutions to management problems regarding religion. So that's another one. So our motto in that course, because we are a Catholic institution, and from the start, there are many things that challenged us when we designed the course and throughout the teaching of the course. I also teach at this course. But in the end, it's very interesting that they embrace our main motto. And our main motto is, you will never have peace in the world if you do not have peace among religions. And so having peace among religions means having information about those religions, understanding those religions, and dialogue starts there. A third example is not a school example, but it is something that has been done for a long time, which is the promotion of voluntary experiences in the university. So here in Porto, we have a unit called CASO, and CASO has been promoting volunteer experiences to students, mostly students, also teachers if they want, and staff, mostly students. And so we could also share that experience. And for that, I would have to invite the person that leads the unit. But quickly, those are the three top things that I've recalled, but maybe there are more.
So the discussion would be more around, let us say, the first and foremost thing that we want to tell is that we have, for the last 2 years, we have initiated looking at students as junior scholars. And this is something that we have promoted. The reason for this is that many of the students who come to study in these schools these days, many of them may come from a very strong business background. And because they already come from a very strong business background, a profit motive or a profit-centered thinking is always very hardwired in their mind. And one of the things that we want to foster in the students is curiosity and to think also beyond profit. That's the reason for which we have started calling our students not as students but as junior scholars who should have that spell of curiosity in them so that they can constantly keep exploring. We have this social initiatives and community engagement programs, not just to take them and have a day of having a different kind of an experience. We want them to understand the problems that the world faces and how they map to the different kind of SDGs. So the sensitization around SDG is very essential because we believe that if we have to develop responsible leaders of tomorrow, I have constant interactions with James Stoner, who all and have been and very actively advocate the being tipping point initiative as well. I know John is already shaking his head because he also understands that. But the reason is that we look at each student, we start them as junior scholars, but eventually we have to transform them as responsible leaders of today and tomorrow. And if we have to do that, we have to create people who focus on the three. We focus on the 3 A's. The first A is attentiveness, attention, and awareness. That's the first A. People have to become attentive, and they should be aware about the issues, the global, which exist both at the global and a local level, and how they can connect the global and local together. That's the first thing. Second is authenticity. How do we Many of the students come very authentic and they spell out that they come with a very solid, rational profit motive. We have to explain them. We have to create that paradigm shift that thinking rational is not just about thinking profits. It's something beyond that. It's about planet and it's also about people. But how do you create that? So we take a very experiential route to it, which is backed up by the traditional and conventional case study and role play methods, which we normally use in classrooms as well. And the third stands for agility. We have to think fast and we have to think ahead and we have to use technology. We are a school which which totally aligns with the fact that AI and generative AI is not going to go away, and there's no point in hating it. It's good to ponder upon the ethicality of application of these technology. At the same time, we have to accept the fact that it's going to stay. So if it is going to stay, how do we create the idea of responsibility around it? One of the tracks which I'm running in the upcoming Responsible Management Education Research Conference in Serbia, it's also on artificial intelligence for responsible management education, because I think this dialogue is also very essential. But if we have to create responsible leaders in this 3A, and pardon me if I take a little bit extra time, I'll take 2 more minutes. If we have to create these leaders, ultimately, it should not be like the faculty goes and it should be the preacher teacher. It cannot happen like that. We have to have a two-way communication. And ultimately, it has to come from the top as well. So when we talk about when our Vice President, Raul Rodriguez, is an active advocate of responsible leadership and GRLI in various forums, the reason for that is we want to create the right institutional logics. So we are a university if you ask me to sum it up, we believe in the four I's. The first I stands for institutional logic. We have to create the right institutional logic at the top, which should percolate down the university. So the university leadership and their vision and purpose is very crucial, and how that gets communicated across the university. The second is interdisciplinarity and internationalization. Is the third I, and that is on which I'm going to run a roundtable in the upcoming Global Forum of PRME, because I think many of the universities in their pursuit of accreditation are focusing on internationalization, but it should not be a blind internationalization. It should ultimately foster a culture of collaboration and interdisciplinarity. So interdisciplinarity and internationalization, these are the two I's. And the last I obviously is intrapreneurship. Whether our students or our junior scholars eventually become a PhD student, or they go on to work in corporates or start their own businesses, ultimately the seed of entrepreneurship and solving difficult problems should be put in. And that's why the fourth I, that is entrepreneurship. So these are the four I's that we focus on to create the leaders who are attentive, authentic, and agile. And for that, we have all these different kinds of student-led initiatives that we create, which address sustainability, business, and research. So that's in a nutshell the entire story that I would like to put forward. Yeah.
So I'm also curious if there are any other challenges or questions that you are facing in your work while developing those types of projects with students. Kind of what are you observing? Where are the challenges? What are you seeing?
I think challenges and confusions will always be there when we are trying to bring transformation, right? It's an ongoing process, and if I start listing it down, that list will never end. So it's always better to just stay in the moment and take things one at a time and just solve it. So when we see our students involved in very meaningful initiatives, right, it transforms us as well. My point of view is that we are thinking about creating responsible leaders of tomorrow. But in that creation process, are we also giving ourselves the opportunity to become a better human being? And I think that is also very essential. Why I talk so much about interdisciplinarity. There was one faculty in the design school, and we were constantly trying to find a way to collaborate together. She got a degree in fashion, but eventually we ended up creating a workshop, a design workshop. Both of us, we have administered it in a non-profit, which actually rescues children from trafficking. Uh, and, 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 and I was very actively a part of it. Both of us did it. And we also involved some students in the designing of the workshop and in the delivery of the workshop. And it was a very generous support that we got. The government of Delhi, the Delhi government also allowed us to do it. But it was not about creating a transformation for them per se, right? They are trauma-inflicted subjects. But when you talk to them and when you see, even after so much of trauma, they have that spark of curiosity, and they also want to study, they also want to show their skills and acumen. Now, these kinds of real experiences, they don't move the subject, they move us as well. So when we go back to the classroom, we are a much more conscious, much more responsible. And just now, I think Raquel was talking about the different values that different religions follow. And I think when we have these real experiences and when we have diversity, every one of us is a different kind of a meaning and different interpretation when they engage in this. And all of that really comes out in their reflective writing, in the research writings that they do. We encourage students to write a lot, because when they write, there's a lot of thought which comes out, and we also get surprised when we review their papers as well. And all of that, this helps us in understanding how curriculum development should look like now. How can we do that so that we better connect with them and make them do what really matters?
Thank you for sharing. And Raquel, do you maybe have anything to reflect back or something that comes up for you?
Yes. I think that of the three experiences that I shared, I think that the first for me maybe it can be the focus of our conversation. And for years, I've taught strategy and have included in our strategy course considerations about sustainability and more recently SDG, the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, and so on. But one of the things, and then so I had strategy, and then I knew that some of my students would be doing volunteering in CASO, and things should not be disconnected. And so the opportunity to create this modality in final project was really a way to try to facilitate for some students the opportunity to understand that while they are working, they can really be changing the world. And we started with non-profit organizations in this modality, but maybe we can evolve into working with companies in a social responsibility spirit. So in a way, this modality is a contribution to create those responsible leaders that Anindo was talking about. Because sometimes students see things as disconnected. So I'm going to work in a company to earn as much money as I can. And then maybe if I have time when I'm older, I'll do some volunteering. Or there are some engaged students that already do volunteering, but they really see that as something separate. And one of the things that I worry about as a teacher is that notion of civic space. And we know that, including in Europe, the European civic space is shrinking, not only in Eastern and Central Europe, but there are signs in other countries that we would never think of, like the UK, like Greece, where the civic space is really shrinking. And so being a responsible leader means also getting their feet into being promoters of a civic space, and that means engaging with nonprofits, engaging with social issues, or maybe being in companies, but in their companies being those entrepreneurs that also care about social issues. And so the question and the challenge that I have, going a bit back on what you're trying to ask us, so it merges into this question. In fact, it's how do we create responsible leaders? How do we show our students that you can be a seed of change, a source of change? You can be an agent of change. And so this modality is really showing them you can really act on problems and find solutions. You are able, because sometimes they feel they are very far away from the possibility of finding solutions. They think, I cannot solve that. I'm too young. I know nothing. I've been studying theory. So how are you asking us to give such a huge step to solve a problem in a food bank that has been living with problems for so many years? And a few weeks into the work, in fact, they're so creative. They're so engaged with the problems. They're so able to contribute. It's amazing to see the change. how can we pick these experiences and explode them into something wider so that we can, as universities and schools, have more impact, not only in 3 teams, but in every student. So that is a question and a challenge that I have. And so connected with that idea of responsible leadership, but also connected with this problem that we're living more, I think, nowadays than before, which is preserving the civic space and create people that have a voice and a will to act on the early signs that we're having everywhere, I think, in the world, but in Europe is also an issue. And sometimes people think that Europe is not an issue, but it is an issue. And the other thing is how to help students while they do this. How do we help them reflect and be critical? Because that's a challenge that I have, a very particular challenge in this course, because we're using a service learning methodology and approach, which is widely practiced socially, widely practiced, especially in Latin America, and we work with a university there, and they try to challenge us to also work on a reflective space for students, to try to really create moments in which they write about their experience, they reflect on their experience, and do that also as a group exercise. And I have many challenges with that. They're very into, when they get into the action modes, they then seem to lose the ability to think of what are the problems that I'm having, what are the struggles that I'm having, what am I learning in the process, how do I use the learning to be better next time. So that's a challenge. But I would say those two are the most relevant, and I don't know if that's enough. I can think of others.
Give a quick comment to this. I totally agree to the civic space and reflective space, and actually it's a very good point because just 6-7 months ago, 1 year ago, I started to work with another PRME champion, that's QNF, which is here in Madrid. So I work with one of the professors there. So we are trying to extend the idea of employee voice and employee silence in the context of student voices. So we are trying to understand that how can we best how universities and institutions can, and their leadership can better capture the student voices. And I think that also connects to the idea of shrinking civic spaces and reflective spaces that you're also talking about, that how do we create those spaces, because all of us may want to speak a lot of things, and how do we make them conscious about that, yes, you can speak and it's safe for you to speak it up, and at the same time also making them conscious not to be overly loquacious and don't speak too much, and just have that sense. So that's also interesting. Yeah.
If I may just step in here for a second, firstly to express my gratitude for being part of the conversation at this early stage, because it's already incredibly helpful. We already have a lot of stuff here that I think will be of benefit to the wider landscape of not only the GRLI, but beyond. So, I want to acknowledge, Raquel, you brought in basically the question that Hans Kuhn proposed, right, in his book Global Responsibility, which was kind of the famous book on global responsibility, even though I think the question around global responsibility predates what he wrote, but not only in the kind of the spiritual domain. So I want to acknowledge that and maybe point out that there's a lot of work still to be done in the GRLI and beyond to continue to hold that question. What does it mean to be globally responsible? I also want to acknowledge that Anindo, you're bringing some really interesting kind of contextual learning from your institution about how you are framing at an institutional logic perspective the discourse and almost the kind of the culture and the ways of working. And that is critically important to anything that you do with students or that are student-led or with student innovations. So that's really good. What I'm realizing, and I could be wrong here, but the partner pods, yes, they are once-off events, but it's ultimately connected to a bigger and ongoing collaborative inquiry. And I'm starting to think, Darija, whether perhaps having excerpts from today already available for people to look at and say, gosh, this is interesting. Porto and Woxsen are talking together about their learning in this space. We have something that we can contribute because we know that Canterbury's 12 hours ahead of us in time zones, right? So let's put this on. Say to Canterbury, do you want to host a similar conversation maybe with another institution? And then we snowball from there. So that's just an idea that I want to test with you, is whether you would be open to doing something along those lines.
I'm open to your suggestion. One of the things that I lately most care about is this concept of doing impactful things. And one-off events are not impactful. And so everything that has a bigger perspective of making it an ongoing conversation pleases me a lot. So yeah, I'm open to contribute in the way that you're suggesting. Yeah.
I think the video idea is very good. We can definitely explore that for sure. And perhaps this, if John, you can share today's notes that you have taken,
Yes.
then that would be also very helpful for both me and Raquel, because we can just go back, and because certain things also come and flow, so maybe we can go back and we can read it, and we can be much more prepared, perhaps. Yeah.